Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, will the town clerk please call roll?
Yes, ma'am. Trustee Wakeman?
Here.
Trustee Smith?
Here.
Trustee Granquist?
Here.
Trustee Rodriguez?
Here.
Trustee Trailer?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Ehrlich?
Here.
Mayor Austin?
Here. Okay, does anyone have any additions or deletions to the agenda?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda with moving Leonard's report to between the consent agenda and before the action agenda. After consent agenda and before the action agenda.
Second.
Okay. Town clerk, please call roll for a vote. Sorry. We did that one.
Trustee Trailer?
Yes.
Trustee Granquist?
Yes.
Trustee Wakeman?
Yes.
Trustee Rodriguez?
Yes.
Trustee Smith?
Sure. Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Ehrlich?
Yes.
And Mayor Austin?
Yes. Do we have any citizens' comments? Nobody on Zoom? Okay, we'll skip right over that tonight. We do have a proclamation to read, and this is for our former judge, John Easley, who was our municipal judge, and we'd like to recognize his service to the town. So, do you want me to do it up there, or is it okay here?
Either place.
Okay. Whereas the town of Milliken would like to recognize John Easley for his honorable service to the town of Milliken. And whereas John Easley has represented the town of Milliken as assistant municipal judge and municipal judge from February 1988 through April 2020. And whereas John Easley has demonstrated fairness and respect for all parties in his courtroom and was committed to overall welfare and safety to the town of Milliken. And whereas John Easley was instrumental in establishing Milliken's community court program, and whereas the mayor and trustees of the town of Milliken desire to express their appreciation to John Easley for his years of service to the town of Milliken. Now therefore let it be proclaimed by Elizabeth Austin, Mayor, Town of Milliken, that the appreciation by the mayor and trustees of the town of Milliken are hereby expressed for the years of service performed by John Easley. And his plaque was presented by Chief Garcia, and we have the pictures here presented to him. There he is, for his years of service. Did he have any comments or anything he wanted to convey? Do we know?
Just wanted to say thanks to the town for all that you've done for him. Just wanted to say thanks. Good spirits.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else? Thank you to Judge Easley. Okay. Is there any discussion or comments on the meeting minutes of May 13th, 2020? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I move to approve the May 13th minutes.
I'll second.
Town clerk, please call for a vote.
Trustee Granquist?
Yes.
Trustee Smith?
Yes.
Trustee Wakeman?
Yes.
Trustee Trailer?
Yes.
Trustee Rodriguez?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Ehrlich?
Yes.
And Mayor Austin?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you. Okay, we're looking at the list of bills. Does anybody have any question on the paid list of bills?
I do.
Trustee Rodriguez.
I was just curious about the $30,000 down payment for repairs for the HVAC.
I'd be glad to answer that for you. What we have there is a CIRSA hail damage claim for the roofs and equipment on the roofs. And there was a down payment for the HVAC equipment that had to be purchased that is in town now, but it's scheduled to be installed, was it June 15th and 16th? With the roofing, there's a lot of damage through all of our buildings, and this was our insurance claim on hail damage.
Thank you.
It is all being insurance claim, and we get reimbursed by CIRSA.
Thank you.
Which hail damage? Is this last year's or?
That September, that was the year my car got it while
I
we
think
were
all our cars.
in the
got it.
board
Okay.
meeting.
You remember,
I definitely.
No, I remember.
you lost your windshield set.
Any other questions?
Another one.
Yes.
Sorry, the Survey Monkey, that is $99 a month. What are we utilizing that?
We utilize that for getting information from the general public in regards to parks and trails for the Parks Advisory Board. What their goals or their hopes were that the town would advance trails or fix this park up before that park, what types of things need to be done. I think there were like 26, 28 questions, and it'll be presented at one of our upcoming board meetings, along with a new Parks and Trails master plan. It helped put that book together for the board to look at.
Thank you.
Follow-up question. So do we need that for $99 a month for $1,200 a year?
We
Or-
did that for a monthly fee. It's not an annual.
Right, so by the end of the year, we will have paid $1,200, but we've only used it once.
For what?
If we're paying $99 a month for 12
No, it was a
months-
one time.
It's a year.
No,
Isn't
no. We're getting billed every month for it.
We've got two bills on it. It was the first month and the second month.
Okay. So
No,
this-
it's been canceled, and they used my bank card on it.
We did.
And that bank card got hacked somewhere. I only have had like 5 entries on it. And I said, it'd be easy to figure out where you got hacked on that card. But that card was destroyed about a month and a half ago. So they can't even possibly run another payment through on
Thank you.
it. All right.
Are there any other questions from the board on the list of bills?
I have one.
Oh, boy.
Trustee Smith?
Is the $347,794.60 to Colson the final payment?
No, it is not. It's basically everything other than the retainer.
Okay, thank you.
And we advertise and we wait a period of time. And after that time's up, Wade will say we've met the time frame, and we'll have a final bill for the retainage, which is 10% or something in that ballpark.
Thank you.
I have a request. if I may. So looking at the bills, I noticed that it says paid for 2 months. Is it possible to list what months the bills are paying for?
Normally. Waste management.
So normally, what you'll see is you'll get this every month, and it'll just be the previous month's bills. We list like this one, it says May. The reason this one's, some of these you have a 2-month span is just the way the bills fell. Some of them we paid like the very first week of May, and some of them were due the very last week of May. So the April ones were due like the first week of May was when they were paid. Normally, this will just be 1 month at a time, and we'll present those every month to you. Yeah, this is very unusual. It's just purely the timing of when we, it'll happen twice a year.
Just from an accounting perspective, I like to see what months it is, so that this way, when I go back and refer to detail and memos, that I know what we're paying for.
Okay.
Just-
So going forward, like I said, this is an anomaly. Going forward, when you see the list of bills, it'll be for stated month, May, or it will be for stated month, July, whatever it is. I mean, yeah, this one's unusual, just because of the timing.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything else? Alrighty. We are now going to go to the town administrator's report. Administrator Singwall.
Yes, Mayor. Since our last meeting, it's been a very hectic couple of weeks. There have been a lot of things happening, a lot of things that the town's been working on, just with springtime. I can report today that we did test the Centennial Lake well. We do have the Hillsborough water coming in to Centennial Lake down the ditch. It hit the lake just over the weekend. Our first diversion into the lake, I believe, was Tuesday. Was it Tuesday? But we've got the lake up high enough that we've tested out the pumps in the pump house that we worked on last year. We have the recharge well piped directly into the hard line for the irrigation system over there. So that's all up and running. Dealing with the COVID is always a lot of fun. There's constant questions and adjustments because things change daily and things that we're always walking a tightrope on that. Kathy, King's father, has been feeding the seniors out of the parking lot. We have a car parade every Monday and Friday in the parking lot, and we're producing the meals out of the kitchen that we're getting from the county, and they're putting them together in bags and they're delivered to the cars. I helped on the first delivery for handing them out because it was a new process and it kind of caught them off guard time-wise, but they've been doing a great job ever since, and it's nice to see the folks coming back to town hall. We've been coordinating with a lot of other towns and working on the water issue. We've been working hard on the Hillsborough stuff. Leonard's going to talk to you about that tonight. And I'm working hard on some things with the developer and the 2.5 Cap Farm shares. I think some of the things said tonight may be a little misleading or a little bit rosy, but we'll bring you up to date on that. And Leonard will bring you up on a lot of it. I think my letter to the Hillsborough that Scott and Leonard and Forrest have been helping me put together. I started out on a 1.5-page letter. It's up to about 5-page letter, and it's very detailed of a lot of the issues that we've had problems with. And I'll probably have that available to you for next week, our next meeting. Other than that, I'll just say it's been a busy week. A lot of things are happening in town. We've got our work staff working 4/10s now, our works department, water department, and parks department. Town staff is all on site working 5/8 like we have been. Didn't I say water? I said water, wastewater, and parks. 4/10s. Oh, you changed? There's still 5 days? Oh,
Okay.
okay, never mind.
All right.
That's all I've got, Mayor.
Okay,
Can I
thank
bring
you.
something up? Or-
You have a question, Holly?
I do have a question on Centennial Lake.
Yes.
Remember that big snowstorm we had, like at the beginning of COVID? It broke some branches that have been down, but there's also some big ones like hanging up in the trees. Just, I don't know if they saw that or not, but
Probably not.
okay. Because I know they've been really busy. But yeah, there's a few. But thank you.
Broken branches around Centennial Lake.
Yeah, and the big trees around the path. closer to the dog park?
In the newsletter that's going out in the next water bill, we're reminding people about their watering schedule. We're working hard with Greeley to lower everyone's water rates. And if people can water on their schedule, it'll be very helpful. We fought like the devil trying to deal with the weeds in town. If you drive up and down Green Street, last year it was about knee-high weeds at this point in time. That has been resolved. A lot of areas we've resolved, and we've asked the townsfolk to now also work on their weeds and dead trees also. So we're all going to be putting a lot of focus on dead trees and dangerous tree branches and weeds.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments from board members, questions?
I believe, in addition to the administrator's report, I believe, Mayor Austin, you wanted to make a comment about some COVID meetings.
Correct.
Please
So,
do that.
I would like to update everybody on where we're at with COVID information. Last Friday, I attended the governor's meeting via Zoom or whatever system that they used. And they talked about where they were at, took a fair amount of notes, but really what it boils down to is this. The state does have a variance process that a business can go to and get a variance to open. But when you think about how many businesses there are in the state of Colorado, how fast a business is going to get a variance is going to be challenging at best. So I wondered, because the Milliken Events Committee works very closely with Weld County Health Department, what our options were through the Weld County Health Department. And I will tell you, if a citizen or a business comes to you and asks about a variance to open through Weld County, there is none. So please don't send them to Weld County.
Okay.
Because there is no process for that. Talked to Weld County again today, their health department, they're very helpful. We're fine with our restaurants open. I have visited our restaurants several times. They're operating well, using the safe distancing guidelines. Nobody wants to end up on Fox News or be a media sensation. So they're all doing extremely well and mindful of what they need to be doing, and that's great. But that leaves us 3 areas that we really need to address. And that would be our churches, our childcare, and our gym. So in talking to Weld County today, they have no provision for a gym to open yet. They're saying they're still following the state guidelines of June 26th. Larimer County went to the state and got a variance, so their gyms are open. So I'm going back to Weld County again, because I can tell you that if we have to go until June 26th, I have talked to the owner, spoken to the owner of Anytime Fitness, and we will not have an Anytime Fitness in town if they cannot open before June 26th. Their business will be under. It's just a fact. So we need to understand, for churches, there are different ways people are doing it. I kind of inquired about, well, what about every 3rd pew with the same family in one pew, and people have to sign up, multiple sessions, and that way the church knows how many people are coming in. And Weld County was very enthusiastic about that type of thing for churches, as long as they spread people out and do the social distancing type of thing. So there are opportunities for churches, and childcare is also on the way as well. And I have not talked to Blooming Littles yet, but I will, and see where they're at as far as opening. So that's my update today.
I was told that childcare is open.
Okay.
And I also heard that I don't think anyone wants to address the issue of trying to close a church right now.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
But yeah.
The pool is closed.
I'm sorry, what?
The pool is closed.
The pool is closed, that's TRPR. It's their decision. I will tell you, the YMCA over in Johnstown is having a very difficult time. They can't get a variance, brand new building, state of the art. They cannot get a variance. It's sad. They're bleeding heavily. So that's where we're at for now. And I will continue to follow up. We as a town cannot tell people, oh, we approve you opening, because we don't have the authority to approve, but we can direct them to the Well County website for further information and make sure that they're following appropriate guidelines. Any
Thanks.
questions?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, just trying to keep everybody informed.
Thank you.
I think at some point in the very near future, we should discuss this topic as a board as to what you would like us to do from the town standpoint.
Okay.
Because we do get questions occasionally on whatnot. It should be a board decision rather than whatever. A lot of people don't want to take a position. They want to see what other people do, and then they kind of slide in behind them and what they're doing. The town of Milliken opened parks and skate parks and dog parks. We talked about that.
Yes.
Matt Lasser from Johnstown called me up and said, what are you guys doing? I told him that we did that, and that afternoon they opened up theirs. I think there's a lot of that going on right now, and a lot of people are afraid to be the one out in front. But if there's anything that you would like to see us do or me do from the town standpoint, that's my job, is to listen to you and do what you say.
Right. I think we're still in the research phase right now.
Right.
And so we'll go forth from there.
Just
But
saying, in
thank
the
you.
near future, we should
Yeah.
maybe have a topic to discuss that, see what you'd like
Okay.
and what your guidelines are. Thank you.
The community's done a good job too with the guidelines we came up with.
Thanks. All righty. There is nothing on the consent agenda, so we will move to having Leonard Wiest, our project manager, present the Hillsborough.
Good evening. I've got a few slides. Did we get them? And if what they say that a picture's worth 1,000 words, I'll be about 1,000,000 words less than Forrest. So hopefully it won't be too long. Oh, where is it at? Okay. I labeled it Hillsborough 101. It's not going to be as technical as what Forrest was talking to you about, the augmentation and the engineering for the water rights and all that. But I wanted to make sure you all understood the total situation with the Hillsborough Reservoir companies. The Hillsborough Reservoir, nope, that's not the right one. There. Hillsborough Reservoir is just west of County Road 19, south of Sweet Gold. It was an active and viable reservoir up until the mid-70s. It silted in, and they didn't do anything to refurbish it. They actually lessened the viability of the reservoir by pulling a ditch around across the face of the dam. The state engineer kind of shook his head when he saw that, but they didn't have all the permitting requirements and everything back in the 70s. As you heard earlier, for us to get earlier water for the soccer fields at TRPR, for our parks that we used, if that reservoir was there, we could get water in April and May if we needed to irrigate lawns. I think a lot of the HOAs use non-pot water. And I used to get calls, I'm sure Tim probably is too, about why they can't water their lawns earlier. So the Hillsboro to us would solve part of the problem of the earlier water. A couple of years I've been here, it's been June 10th, June 15th before they've started running water. And that does not work for bluegrass. It might work for corn, some of the farm crops, but bluegrass needs a little water earlier to make it look good. The Hillsboro is comprised of 3 separate companies. The Hillsboro Consolidated, they actually own the water rights that come out of the Thompson River. And as Forrest explained, some of them are very early priorities. The Hillsboro extension is the middle ditch, which runs from Johnstown Highway 60 back out, loops to I-25 and comes into the reservoir. And then the lower ditch is the Hillsboro Extension Irrigation Company, and that comes from County Road 19 down to the last head gate, which is Bob Snyder's head gate that Dave Bernhardt farms. So I think there's 10 shareholders on the extension, and Brett said he thinks we're 50. We're not 50%. We're 27% of the Hillsboro extension, 26.7%, something like that. The 3 companies, we have 14 shares of Consolidated, which should yield about 1,500 acre feet. And what you heard from Forrest, we actually only get about 775 here. We have 11.5 with carrying rights through both the middle ditch and the lower ditch. And we have 2.5 on the upper ditch. The head gate is right by the Roosevelt football field. That we now need, because the RO plant's working, the wells that we're using, we need more augmentation water. The Hillsboro said if you want to run it down the ditch, you need to buy carrying rights. In the middle ditch, you have to buy some shares, and you have to buy some more shares in the extension. So then when we said, okay, we'd like to buy some shares, they said, there, we have treasury stock, but it's not for sale. So they're very inconsistent in what the way they're treating us.
Why didn't we get carrying rights when we got the 2.5 shares?
I don't know, the board minutes from 2001 or 2 indicated that to accept that water and to give those credits that you gave, that it would come down the ditch to Centennial Lake for augmentation. I wasn't here in 2002, but somebody messed up. Somebody didn't follow through on that somehow.
I did pull the minutes for that meeting, and we had an ordinance that said any Hillsboro water needed to be, that we were buying, needed to be along with carriage rights to be stored in Centennial and Ehrlich Lake. In the minutes of that meeting, the sale of that for the certs that were offset, this was a deal for 501 certificates for building houses. It was contingent upon the fact, the board says, okay, we're going to agree with this, but it's contingent upon the fact that you have the carriage rights with that. Nobody ever followed up on that. And that's one of the questions when Brett was sitting over here, I've been trying to get with him to sit down and ask him what his remembrance of that was, because those certs were supposed to have carriage rights on it. Nobody knows how we ended up with those without the carriage rights.
So the carriage rights, I had heard something about the carriage rights was simply or did not seem to be too much of a problem that we had to apply for them. Like the water shares had the carriage rights, we just didn't apply for them. This was the last meeting.
They're separate shares. There's 3 separate companies. So when we accepted the 2.5 shares to get it down to Centennial and to Ehrlich Lake, like the minutes and the ordinance said, there should have been a corresponding 5 shares for the middle ditch and 10 shares for the extension. Those shares were not given to the town.
So it sounds like the town has a sock and the Hillsborough ditch has a sock, but neither of us have a pair. Is that what I'm understanding? Like, we've got Hillsborough water with no carriage rights. Does someone have carriage rights with no water?
That's what we're trying to find. No.
They have treasury stock that's available. They have not issued all of their authorized stock in those companies, but
Right.
they won't.
But the
water
treasury
that
stock
was purchased was on the consolidated, which is the upper part of the ditch.
Mhm.
In order to move that water down, it has to have the ability for carriage on the different sections of the ditch to get it to us. That was a condition on the sale and the agreement back in 2014, I think it was. 2008.
Yeah, it was earlier than 14.
2008.
So the consolidated is where we get the shares of water, and the other 2 companies you showed in the PowerPoint are the ones that have the carriage rights?
They're basically carriage rights, yes. You pay an assessment just like it. Back sometime in 1915s in my mind, they split the ditch into 3 companies because the IRS definition of a mutual company is everybody's treated equally. They figured that operating the reservoir was going to be more costly, so they made it a 4-to-1. If you use water down here, you're paying the equivalent of 4 shares. Milliken is paying a total of 83 assessments on 14 shares of water. Pay some to the consolidated, some to the middle, some to the extension. And one of my concerns, Tim's concern, is that all of the shareholders that were paying that extra assessment for the extension company to maintain that reservoir, they didn't maintain the reservoir. They let it silt in. It hasn't been operated as good as it should have been. But yeah, we pay $500 a share for consolidated. We pay $300 a share for the middle ditch, which is at 2-to-1. So if you got 1 share consolidated, you got to pay 2 assessments on the middle. And then on the extension, we have to pay 4-to-1. So we're paying a total of 83 assessments altogether. Whereas a true consolidated, a mutual company like the Greeley Loveland, they pay the same as on the first head gate as they do on the last head gate. They separated this into 3 so they could distribute the costs at the time more evenly.
At that time or at this time?
At that time, when they created it.
And still.
Is it still believed to be evenly spread?
Yeah, right now we're still paying. Let me try and explain it just a little bit differently. Each share, say, is $300. On the extension irrigation, it's a 4-way split. So out of our 11.5 shares, we now pay 46 shares, 4 times 11.5, 46 shares times $300, or $13,800 a year just for our share of the extension irrigation, which is the reservoir and east of there. That's been being paid since they developed that reservoir. By everybody on the extension is paying 4 times a share of $300, whatever their share is. If it's 1 share, they take 4 shares times $300 and they pay $1,200. Is that making any sense? Or or $1,200.
It makes sense in the divvy up, but it doesn't make sense as to what we're getting for that money.
Exactly. And they haven't done any maintenance. They haven't done any repairs. And that's one of the huge questions in the letter that
But
we're
it sounds
sending
like
off.
that's a little bit of a different issue, as like we have one issue of what we're getting and what we're paying for. There's another issue of we're missing a sock.
Mhm.
You know, we've got the shares, but not the carriage rights. And somewhere, there's a carriage right that matches our share.
No, because those
So then
shares,
where,
they never came down the ditch. Those shares came down that head gate by the Johnstown sewer plant, went to the CAP farm. So those shares never had a carriage right. They do have some treasury stock, but they are not willing to sell that to us. But those CAP shares did not come down the ditch.
We're dealing with,
Yeah, there is no
we're
ditch.
dealing with ditch company rules,
Lines.
and you have
Okay.
to have carriage rights on each section of the ditch to move your water. Now, if
so you're saying they never existed?
they never existed, but they have extra carriage agreements in the company. Dave Bernhardt had CBT that we bought from him, 127 CBT shares. He had those delivered down the ditch, and technically, we believe, probably purchased some carriage rights to get it down there.
Now,
What,
the Hillsborough actually allows that foreign water, that CBT, to come down the ditch when the ditch is only at 60% capacity. So they
and
don't
you have to have carriage to do that. We vacated that, we lessened the amount of water going down the ditch, and we purchased those CBT. So where's those carriage rights? Well, they're back in the treasury stock. We'd like to buy them. Well, we only sell carriage rights to ag water. Parks and green space has been adjudicated by the court to be ag water. Then they didn't have space. We said we vacated those CBT shares. Other people down here are taking CBT down here, and we've got priority water. Then they decide they don't want to sell shares at this time. And we thought we had a bunch of friends on the different boards, and they all signed the same agreement, even the ones we thought were supporting us. They signed the agreement that they had met and that we have to go through a private attorney. But I'll let Leonard carry on. It was just getting confusing on the pricing, and that's where I wanted to give you some input.
back when it was an active year-round reservoir, yeah, there's a cost to operate that year-round reservoir. Liability insurance, maintaining it, the ice, a whole bunch of, so the 4-to-1 kind of makes sense back when it was a reservoir. It doesn't make sense anymore since it's not a reservoir. But anyway, that's one of the inconsistencies that we've noticed in the operations of the Hillsborough. They hang their hat on being 3 separate companies to take advantage of mutual irrigation companies are a 501c12 under the IRS code. So they don't have to pay income taxes unless they get a bunch of outside income in. So they're taking advantage of by separating it into 3 companies. But then they adopted, as Tim mentioned, an all for one, one for all resolution that it's their water, it's the middle ditch, blah, blah, blah. So they're all in it together and they won't deal with us individually as just the extension company. They want all 3 companies involved. Even when I tried to bring it up in the 2017 annual meeting, the chairman of the consolidated at that time, and they run 3 separate meetings. He said, we don't have consolidated. This is a consolidated meeting. We don't have anything to do with that. Wait till the extension company meets and you can talk to them about it. A lot of inconsistencies in what the way they've treated Milliken. We finally asked for a special meeting so we could sit down and give them some information. They said, we'll stay there all night if we have to. Well, we'll stay till midnight to get the information. Well, they then scheduled us for 30 minutes kicked us out of the room so Johnstown could come in after 30 minutes. And then the next week, they says we couldn't act on it because we don't have enough information. Just really, whether they're afraid government's going to take over their little ditch or what their reasoning is, doesn't entirely make sense. There's a lot of benefits to all of the farms below and above the ditch, soaking up the ditch with early water, taking advantage of free river when it's available. There's some junior rights that neither the consolidated or the extension have implemented. And we would like to implement those junior rights and get some more water. More water in the area is good for everybody. If we don't use it, it can be rented to some of the farmers. Matter of fact, our 2.5 shares, another inconsistency with what they've been doing. At least we've been renting it out to a couple of the farmers since we haven't needed it. They claim it was an accident, but prior to 2017, they were letting one of those farmers bring it down that ditch, through the middle ditch, down to the extension on a farm on the extension with no carriage rights. Then they told us initially, we don't have the capacity to handle that water through the ditch. They had the capacity when one of their board members was renting it from us and using it down here, but now all of a sudden that capacity disappeared.
And 2 of the 3 board members on the Hillsborough Extension Irrigation are the ones we're leasing the water to, and they vote against us 2-1 to be able to carry the water.
So there's 3 board members?
There's 3 board members and they didn't recuse themselves due to conflict of interest. That's on the irrigation. Consolidated
How are
irrigation.
we not approaching gross negligence or other issues?
Oh, trust me, we're going there.
Okay,
We've been
keep
playing nice.
going.
We've been playing nice. You're getting a picture of what we're dealing with.
Okay.
So if we can't get the carrying rights to run that water down, we've got Forrest looking at, and Scott Hallwick, the water attorney, using that CAP headgate and bringing it down to the existing CAP farm, which is mostly Boulder Scientific now. From the Johnstown sewer plant to 257 was the CAP farm. If we can get it to that farm, we can put in a flume. We can get water engineers permission to augment through that farm rather than through our normal system. So there's an option to get it here if everything else fails. But Forrest has been told that that isn't a lateral, that's our private ditch. You can't run your water through that ditch. So that'll either be a court case or something, but it used to run through that lateral to get to that farm. And it still does when we rent that water to the farmer. They use that water to farm that farm. So they're very inconsistent. And you know, my impression is, number one, they're afraid of government taking over their ditch. And number two, they think they should share in that free river, those new junior water rights that we're going to put into that river, carry over without putting up any of the $7 million. They think that they should be able to share in that. So anyway, it's an ongoing battle. Here's I wish we had a bigger screen TV in here. If I was still the boss, we'd buy a big screen TV, but.
Can you zoom in on that at all, Steve? Nada? Okay.
Anyway, you can see the dotted green line down Highway 60. Is this a laser? Yeah. It doesn't show up on the screen. Anyway, that is labeled as a lateral, but now we're being told it's a private ditch. We can't run water down. So one way or another, we need to find a way to use that 2.5 shares, which is about 250 acre feet, 325,000 gallons in an acre foot. It's a lot of water. And the price of water in 2018, we bought those shares, 175 shares, $4.7 million. Today, that water is valued over $12 million. So at least on the books, sitting on a nice increase. I wish my investments would have done that well, but they haven't. So anyway, one of the things we're doing is trying to find a way. Number one is to use that CAP water. And Tim's letter is pointing out some other options to him. Maybe some legal action. Their own bylaws gives us some options to address. Talking privately to some of these guys that are on the board, they tell we're in favor of it. We're in favor of it. But when they sat in that little private meeting and the other farmer is buying their corn crop from them or hauling their sugar beets for them, it's the peer pressure. They vote with that rather than what they're saying. So, it's a tough one. This whole valley is all tied together, working together, using equipment, sharing equipment, farming together, and we've got to get through that. That's what the reservoir could look like with water in it. That's kind of what it looks like now. And it used to be a viable fishing full reservoir, and it could be again, and it would benefit everybody all the way up and down the ditch if we can get it figured out. And it is a problem, but I've always been taught that problem to be defined as a problem, they're solvable. If it's just a situation, it's not necessarily solvable. Like the virus is kind of a situation we're in right now. But this problem will either be resolved by finding a way to work with them, either through their bylaws or through a court case, or by the state dam engineer coming in and saying, hey, that dam seeps, and it does. There's cattails growing below it. And one of the fixes we were going to do was put in tow drains and fix all of that. Plus a wider dam, key it into bedrock, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, it would benefit everybody. You could run free river. You'd have, if you didn't use all of your water this year, you could leave it in the reservoir, have carryover water. I personally don't understand why they're opposed to it at the moment. So, yes.
When do you think you could probably bring this to some sort of decision one way or another, so that we're not, we either determine it's a viable project and still has life to it, or no?
If we can't do it through a couple of the options I mentioned, then as Milliken grows, that the state is going to make them do something with it. I've been involved with 2 other fix or breach orders, one north of Windsor and one on the Greeley-Loveland by McQuinney's Mall over there. It happens. They tell you either breach that dam or put some money into it. If that happens, it'll get solved. They might choose to breach it, but if it does, we're only on the hook for, well, if it's all for one for all, we're only on the hook for 11%.
11%. They put because it's silted in and they couldn't get the water to the head gate, they pulled a ditch all the way around the east side of it and across the face of the dam to the gate. When the state engineer was out there, he was very upset. because that compromises the dam. You can't go in there and put a ditch on the face of a dam. And they don't have any record of that at the state office that he thought. So part of my letter is asking them, what engineer stamped your design for that and when did they file it with the state? For that 2.5 acres, or that 2.5 shares of Hillsborough, we gave, along with some other water, 501 certs for housing. Right now, we're having to lease CBT in order to handle our needs. We've got Glick that we can't use, and we've got Cap Farm water that we can't use right now. And that's killing us on our number of houses that are being built, plus another 300 building permits coming up over the next few years. We got to supply water to each one of those houses that we agreed to back in 2001, 2004, 2 different contracts. Yes, Leroy.
So on the Cap Farm, I'm just throwing this out there, when we owned that and we used to irrigate it. So we used to go over there to the Carnation plant in Johnstown. That's where the head gate was to get our water to that Cap Farm. There's an underground tile that runs through town, off the Highway 60 there, right across from the Great Western. It drops into an open ditch.
Well,
And it used to go down, that's how we got our water for that farm.
from
So what happened to that?
From what I understand now, the head gate is by the bridge, by the Roosevelt football field, comes down 2nd Street, kind of behind the maintenance, the Johnstown maintenance shops, over down Highway 60. So, and I think that's what,
Just inside that fence, inside the fence, all along 60. If you look at it, there's a ditch that runs all the way down.
Okay. Just curious, that's how we used to get water to that farm.
And that ditch,
It was right there beside it, right across from the Carnation plant.
Yep.
Or whatever they call it now, but back in the day, it was the Carnation plant.
see, and because of that Carnation, that milk condensery, is what we called it, and the sugar factory, the Hillsborough ditch had water in it year round, as did the reservoir. And now they claim they can't run that ditch earlier, so.
So I have 2 questions. One is, you said we're 27% owner of this
At the extension,
the
extension.
lower part,
the lower ditch.
Does that include the reservoir?
yes.
Yes,
Okay. Does that include up to the CAP farm area?
No,
No.
that's the upper ditch.
So the other question is, what is the election process of these board members that are sitting on that?
we would probably have the ability to do something on the lower ditch here.
Okay.
The extension irrigation. We will have to work with Johnstown and find some friends in order to do something on the upper ditch. That's why they had a special meeting and they said, we're one for all for one. One company can't vote to do something that the other companies don't agree to. So they're trying to see that we could do something down here. The title of the Hillsborough Reservoir, and it was also called
Little
Thompson Reservoir, is in the Hillsborough Extension Irrigation Company. And everything that I've come across through my research shows that it belongs to them, not to the whole ditch company. That's why they've got a 4-to-1 split on their stock and they're paying more money. But it's being managed one for all for one, out of one secretary and a couple of the more vocal board members on the upper ditch on the consolidated.
And the second question I had on that one was, where is the accounting of the funds that are received? Is that public record? Where does that
We
go?
get it in the annual newsletter.
Just the shareholders?
The annual meeting. Yeah, they hand out the financials at the annual meeting.
Did we pick through that?
I've got that.
Yeah.
They do have a reserve, but they haven't been putting anything into maintenance or preventative or curing the silting. You know, one of the things that Leonard and we were talking about was putting a 4-bay on the inlet, to keep it from silting up if we did a project to fix it up. But they're not doing anything on it right now. But the money is going into an account, but I don't know what they use it for other than operations.
There's no foul play that you know of on that front?
We're not seeing any, but if people are getting carriage downstream, they don't always seem to have a entry for carriage rights.
Hmm.
But these guys are moving water around. When we ask, we are not allowed to. That's
Do they have any bylaws or?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And there's a couple
I can't even
provisions
find
in,
them.
there's a couple provisions in their bylaws that, 50% of the shareholders, which we for sure could get on this extension, can ask the president to call a special meeting. We'd like to call a meeting for the shareholders just for informational purposes. We tried that earlier, right before this virus hit, and board members called who we sent the letter to and invited that not to come to our meeting, and that we couldn't do that. And I said, I'm sorry, I can buy lunch for whoever I want to. It's an informational meeting. So it's
a meeting we requested. We couldn't go.
Yeah, they don't really have any grounds. We were trying to work with them still, so
Yeah.
we honored that and we backed off because we thought we were going to be able to talk to midnight. In an annual meeting, we weren't even allowed to talk. They said that we'll do a special meeting for you, so we didn't push the issue at the annual meeting. Now, this is Leonard's second annual meeting where he was shut down from talking on this.
Whoa.
That's not in the bylaws either, that not only a shareholder, but the major shareholder, the next highest shareholder on the ditch, owns less than half the amount of shares that we do.
I think if their concern is government involvement in their ditch, they're doing the wrong thing to avoid that.
I'm just guessing, but that's the feeling I get. Yeah.
I think they're kind of going the wrong direction there.
Do they have an attorney?
Johnstown had a meeting with them also, and they haven't heard anything back from them either. But we also had an election on board members. We tried to get one of Leonard's relatives on the board, Gary, the mayor of Johnstown, on that upper section. And we've heard different rumors on how they vote. At one meeting, everybody held up their hand and everybody got one vote. There were people that had a half a share. There were people that were together that had shares together. And then Leonard, and he was representing our 14 shares, and they did a head count for and against, and they just counted by person where each share is supposed to have a vote. So in the last meeting, we don't know exactly. Alls we were informed of who the winner was, not a tally of votes cast for each one of the candidates and how it stacked out. We were only told so-and-so won.
We can bring 14 people next time.
That's what you call getting hometown.
Oh, yeah.
Back in the sporting days, you got hometown. That's what you call this.
But the bylaws say one vote per share. So 14 shares would have 14 votes. A half a share would have a half of a vote. And most of the shareholders don't think that's how it works. You get one vote
But to the
no
mayor's
matter
point-
what.
To the mayor's point or question, what is the timing of bringing this to a head or resolving it either peaceably or otherwise?
When we send the letter, we should get a good feel of what's happening pretty quick, or Scott will start moving forward with a few things to put the ball in their court so that we're not always begging and being shut down. No longer bending to their will, but saying, we're going to be reckoned with one way or another, and then see where we go from there. If it's going to be a huge court fight and we're going to fight with these guys, I talk to people every day that go back 4 generations, how this guy's dad did this to his great-great-grandfather, to his great-great-grand. You're not gonna win in a long-term battle with these guys. The only way is with time and collecting enough interest and vote, but trying to show them that they are going to upset us and we're gonna walk away from this dam project. And the $7 million we were willing to invest in it, we're not going to. And when the state says, all right, you gotta fix or breach, we're only required to pay 11%. That'll be $770,000, and each one of them will have to think about how much their share is and how much they'll have to come up with out of pocket. You know, we're gonna throw some reality at them.
Okay, so could we have a update, say in a month? We would have
Oh,
maybe some
by the
progress?
next meeting, probably.
Okay, so we'll get an update then.
When
Leonard?
we started that this year, we were hopeful to get it fully designed, get out to bid, issue the bonds, and have the work done over this coming winter. The engineers tell us that they could get in there when the ditch goes out in October, let it dry, start doing that, building the dam, and it'd be ready to go by April of next year. Forrest kind of alluded to it with his bar graph, but because they don't have a place to put the water in April and May,
Mhm.
it goes down the river past the head gate for the Hillsborough. We're not getting a full 1,500 acre feet of water that we should be getting. What did he show, 700 acre feet or
Yeah,
something?
that's about what we're getting, 700.
And if the reservoir was there, they could open the head gate and run it down, soak the ditch, put it into the reservoir, and then with some exchanges later on in the summer, they can exchange it up and down the ditch. I don't understand why they're not jumping all over that, but
Like this year, even a few weeks prior to now, we could have taken Free River, wet the ditch all the way down so they would have less loss. It doesn't cost us anything to run Free River. We don't have any shrink or whatever.
Right.
We could wet the ditch, clean the ditch, put it into the reservoir and save it. Come the season, we don't need all of our water because we have free water that we're putting out through our augmentation sites. They have a real hot, scorching July and they need more water for their alfalfa or something. We've got it available and we can lease it. That was the whole plan. I mean, it's beneficial to everybody, but they don't trust us. It's anything Milliken is wrong. We're trying to cheat them somehow, and I don't understand that.
All right, well, let's see what the letter does and we'll go from there.
okay.
So, thank you very much.
Thank
you.
you,
Thank you very
Leonard.
Thanks. Okay,
Way too much water tonight.
all right.
I need-
Moving on to the action agenda. We have our HVAC contractor selection. This will be by Scott Clem, our Streets and Facilities Director. Welcome to your first presentation.
Evening, Mayor, Board. Yes, this will be the first, and I'm sorry for the delay. I kind of got thrown in on the tail end of this and still learning my job with this, so we did finally get it. I will say I did put quite a bit of time into this, research of this, looking into this. I mean, coming from my work in the private industry, in the business field, how a lot of these packages put together was a big key thing to me. Our choice, unfortunately, is one of the higher choices in the bid package, as you guys have probably seen. But when you do look at the bid package, you see a full encompass of scope of work, what they're gonna do. They included water heaters that other companies didn't include for this. I did do reference checks on all the companies. They felt most highest ratings. They had A+ Better Business Bureau, no complaints. We basically, James May, our facilities guy, went around with all these companies and took them on the tours. The CMS and the comfort systems were the only ones that actually physically opened every furnace, every register, took numbers themselves, looked at every unit, kind of got a good feel of what would be included, we believe, in probably their preventative, where some of the other companies were assuming. So we kind of went with the CMS, kind of just in the plans of the feel of their customer service, why they were here, their willingness to kind of help us bring some stuff in-house we could do ourselves for, you know, repairs, maintenance. They were willing to walk our facilities manager through some of that, but he had repairs. They were very overall thorough with it. I mean, like I said, all their reviews basically they were head on with the kind of services they would be providing for us. And like I said, their scope of work was astounding. They had a complete breakdown of every unit they were going to repair, what they would do, what's included. And I mean, even after looking back at some of the numbers of the repairs we've done in the last 3 years, which Wade and Courtney provided for me, really we've had quite drastic repair costs. And what our hopes is that we're putting a little more in the money in the preventative now, which should hopefully bring that back end of the repairs down. And by bringing some of that in-house or them helping us get the parts and we do the work ourselves, they seem really willing to help us do that. That's why my push is for 1 year, we try them, we pay them a little more in the preventative. We get more knowledge out of them, hopefully, for our own basis. Plus their response times, everybody said they had very good response times for emergency calls. They're real fair with their calls. Like I said, overall, all the research I've done, they just stood out. They may be more, but it seemed like you're getting more for that bang.
All right, thank you for your presentation. All right, we'll start with commentary. Trustee Rodriguez, do you have comments, questions?
I have a few. Apologize. So reading the contracts, their terms are net 10.
Mm-hmm.
Is that payment terms or is that just to sign the contract?
That I didn't really look. I'll be honest, I didn't look. I would imagine that probably be payment depending on. Yeah.
So if we have an issue per se with a repair that's done, we got to pay them in 10 days. That doesn't really give us the opportunity.
But the good thing is with what their scope of work here shows, we have a little more fight with what they do for us now because they've outlined pretty much each unit by what is covered.
And the other piece of that is the advantage of being a government is we don't have to pay terms. We have 30 days to pay the bill. Regardless, they can put it in a contract. We do not have to follow it. That is our choice. We will not be stuck with some repair that is
followed through.
That is unsubstantiated.
So the other question is as well is the 5% cost increase after the contract is up and we must provide a 30-day notice. I'm a little nervous of just automatically new and then 5% increase.
Well,
thoughts on that?
And our thoughts is we're going to renegotiate. We'll see how the year's going cost-wise or that. I mean, if we're saving it with our preventative, a 5% is really a cheap investment for a better preventative and less cost in the long run. I mean, if you look at the cost we've put out in repairs versus our preventative, we're double in repairs of what we're doing for preventative in a year. So our hopes is we're going to swing that the other way, that our preventative might be a little more, but we're not doing the outright cost as much. We know a little more of what we have each year versus that variable out there that every year might go up each time. So
I just have one more, sorry. The other thing is, so they work on a piece of equipment, what type of warranty is on the work that they do? Are we going to be billed every time they come out if something breaks in 6 to 7 days?
a lot of that will depend on the parts. I think a lot of the warranties go more by parts than labor. Labor's usually set, I think, at so much time, but I think parts, every part's different. That comes to the manufacturer, and that's beyond their control a lot of times. So,
But what if it was a repair that they completed that was not 100%?
If they put in a motor, a new motor, and the motor has a 2-year warranty on it, if it goes, the motor's replaced.
and generally that, in them circumstances, a warranty usually picks up the labor replacement on that too, because of failure of the parts. So,
Thank you.
One of the things I'd like to point out to the board, I did get the information from Wade and Courtney. Last year, our total payments to the heating company that we have now for heating and air conditioning was $28,000 plus. Or right, $28,000, a few $100s.
That's for maintenance,
that was maintenance and
Maintenance
repairs.
or-
Maintenance and repairs both.
repairs.
What I understood was.
What's the maintenance out of that 28,000?
What's that?
What was just for the maintenance contract? How much of that? was
Ten
maintenance?
thousand was. the
10,755 was the contract, and then we had 17,616 for repairs.
Repairs.
So we had more in repairs, basically almost double
So
repairs.
are we looking about the same amount in repairs this year, or do we know that?
We don't really know. They were assuming by their pricing that with the thoroughness of it, they're trying to help with some of the little repairs in the preventative part is what we're hoping. And with them working with our technician on our staff, we can kind of maybe learn some of the stuff to hopefully down costs later too, so.
So let's move on to Trustee Smith. Questions or comments?
Well, I think preventative is the most important thing you can do to stop the big dollar amounts that it's going to cost to replace things that aren't taken care of. It's like if you don't change the oil on an engine, it's going to blow. So I think the more you spend on maintenance, the better off you're going to be down the road. And that'd be my thought.
Thank you. Trustee Wakeman?
I think the questions that I had were partially what we paid last year compared to this year, and some of the comments that have already been covered, so I'm good.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Ehrlich?
You say that CMS and Comfort are the only two that opened every
Yes, they're the
piece of
only
equipment
ones
and looked
that
at everything. So
went
we
through and
got a
opened
thorough
everything. Yep.
understanding.
They took their own serial numbers. They didn't go by our numbers.
Okay, so my question is, we got a $4,000 difference between those two.
Mhm.
What's the justification?
Just
Took the higher one.
the scope of work that was included in the bed packet. CMS pretty much lined out their scope of work exactly to a T, what's done with every preventative maintenance, when it's done, how it's done. And basically, from the feel of it, CMS was a little more willing to work with our in-house staff to learn some of this stuff, which will help us in the long run too. So that's, like I said, some of this is based on James and his tour with the companies. These were the two that he brought to me as his top picks, just by feel of their customer service, what they're willing to teach us, what they're willing to do for us, and the time to just to take and put a bid packet together like that shows a lot too. So.
Okay. One more question for the legal side of things, Matt. We had a chance to look at our financial policy in regards to the bid process and how we accept bids.
I have not.
I just want to make sure we're covered. I would say that needs to be looked at.
Okay.
You?
Yes, we are covered.
Yeah.
We are covered.
I've looked at it too.
I'm just going back to some of the
Yeah.
some decisions that were made in the past of how we had to go about making those, and it just rings a bell of why we had to accept some of the lower bids.
That would be section D.
Just want to make sure that we're not going to end up in an issue where one of these companies can come back and say, "Hey, we were the lowest bid. Why weren't we?"
And that's why we're talking to you about it right now. So because we're not choosing the lowest bid, we're bringing it back to the board for discussion and for your decision to be made. We're making a recommendation as to what we should do. If we would have just chosen by ourselves, all we're able to do within the purchasing policies is to choose the lowest bid. Since we're not doing that, we're following the purchasing policy and bringing it back to you for discussion and for your decision, not staff's decision, to be made on the contract.
Okay. That's all I got. Thanks.
Okay, Trustee Trailer?
You did answer my question if they were willing to work with our staff, and
Yes,
it sounds like they are.
yes, very much so.
Also, oh, I'm sorry, what?
Very much so, yeah. It sounds like they definitely, they want to help us cut costs by showing us the little things that we can fix, whether it's buying the parts for them and our tech, our maintenance, staff maintenance comes and puts the part in. They were very open to that. So that was a real big thing for me. That's where you save a lot of costs is in your service calls.
Yeah.
So.
And how does this fit into our budget we had already planned for 2020?
So we don't budget individually for this. We have several line items that account for, HVAC maintenance and repair. Theoretically, in a perfect world, all we have is the maintenance But, you know, we budget for it, but if repairs, all of a sudden, you know, we lose several different pieces of equipment, and we have to replace them, we'll have to come back to you and ask for more budget appropriation to cover that. But in general, yes, this fits within our budget.
Okay. Those are my questions.
Okay. Trustee Grofus?
Yeah, so my first one is, obviously, they seem pretty comparable. There's a disparaging thing in cost, and I understand the quality you presented of this company. Are any of the other companies here within Milliken or closer to Milliken? Or are they all fair or even as far as location goes?
They're all surrounding, basically.
Okay.
Anywhere from Estes Park to Greeley to, you know, northern Denver suburbs and stuff.
Okay.
So I mean, really, they're all kind of response time in general the same. So
The second question is, this obviously their first bid. What were your plans, or what options do we have to come back to them and negotiate this a little more favorably? Things like, for instance, the response time, just sealing it in as same day. I know that their standard is next, that they bid, but can we go back to them and say, we'd like you to do same day, not next, and look at some of these kind of on a situational basis and in a sense counter bid back to them and say, we'd like to use you, but here's some of our terms back, versus just paying sticker price.
We already went out with a RFP asking
yeah,
for.
it was all put out as an RFP.
Yeah, so yeah, at this point in time, we can't renegotiate with one company. If we want to change our terms
Okay.
and change the RFP, we have to redo the RFP and go back out again and get new bids. At this point in time, we can't change the terms.
So in the RFP, was it same day or was that just an optional thing?
It
Like,
was,
for
I think they
instance-
had to fill in the blank, if I remember.
I gave
by
you a
their
copy of
choice.
the RFP that was posted. That was one of the top
Okay.
pieces.
So we simply have to accept it as is.
Is what they bid.
Yes.
The other option is we do not have to accept any of these. We can deny all the bids, not choose anybody, and start the whole process over again. That is an option also. If we don't like what we've received, we can always quit and start over.
Could the same companies rebid?
100%. And then in fact, that's exactly who we will get. Will be the exact same companies. I mean, yeah, they've all.
Maybe a lot higher next time.
But most likely.
Guarantee it won't be cheaper.
My experience is you'll lose half your bidders because they didn't even get talked to, maybe or whatever. You'll lose half your bidders, and the other half know that you'll lose half. Your price goes up. That's my experience when you close a bid and go out, or when you reject the bids and go out and try again. That's my experience with it. Is usually you lose about half your bidders, and your price goes up.
Mhm.
Usually,
Scratch that
not
idea.
always.
One thing we have to remember, these guys are new to these systems, so this is their first year. They've more than likely accounted for a little cushion in there, not knowing the systems. That's where we use them for a year. If we're happy with their services, we renegotiate coming into a second term with it.
Okay.
I think they'll have a better understanding. We'll have a better understanding of them, the feel of everything. I think everybody will have a little better connection, that you'll have a lot more. As we've seen with the contract for the last 3 years, the preventive has always went down each year from that. And I think a lot of the times they just not knowing what they're coming into, they give a little fluff in it, of course. So.
Okay.
So now I have one question. So this year the bid includes the pool at TRPR for $3,500. We're looking at transferring ownership of that, I believe. So therefore that should be taken out for next year, right?
Next year.
Right.
We don't have it transferred. It's got to go to a ballot issue. We don't know if it passes. We got to play like forever right now,
Correct.
the way that we are. We can't
So-
change.
But next year there could be a reduction in that
Absolutely.
area alone.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, any final questions? Hearing none, I'll open it for a motion.
I move to approve signing a contract with CMS.
I second it.
Town clerk, please call for a vote.
Trustee Greenquist,
Yes.
trustee Smith,
Yes.
trustee Trailer,
Yes.
trustee Rodriguez,
Yes.
trustee Wakeman,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Early,
Yes.
Mayor Austin.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you. Next item is the public hearing for consideration and approval of ordinance number 782, Pepper McClanahan, Community Development Director. The time is 7:50, and I am opening the public hearing.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt this briefly. This has not previously been on the agenda, and because we're adopting a code by reference, what we need to do, if the board wants to consider this, is to set this for a public hearing and publish notice in accordance with statutes. I know this sounds a little convoluted, but the board is required to schedule the hearing on whenever it's going to adopt a code by reference. And so we can't really decide this tonight. We're going to take action similar to what I'm recommending for the model traffic code. And so I think that the motion at the end, I have a revised version of that I can read if you would like me to, and we can just get so moved to get this on the schedule for next time. And I can answer any questions about adoption by reference if you'd like.
Do we need to go over this now, or just delay it until it's published?
I think we delay it till it's published.
Yeah, that's all we can do.
Yeah, to clarify, there was a public hearing published. It was not in compliance. It was missing some elements because it's a different type of adoption process since it's by reference. So we need to back up a step, have you set the public hearing, and then we need to re-advertise the public hearing in compliance with the state statute.
Okay, I'll take a motion to table this item.
Can I read you the motion that I recommend?
Go for it.
Lisa?
Okay. This is the wording I would recommend. I move that the proposed ordinance number 782, which would adopt the International Fire Code 2018 edition in the town of Milliken, be scheduled for a public hearing, and that notice of the hearing be published in accordance with statutory requirements with a description of the code taken from section 1 of the proposed ordinance.
I so move.
Second.
Town clerk, please call for a vote.
Yes, ma'am. Trustee Wakeman,
Yes.
trustee Smith,
Yes.
trustee Greenquist,
Yes.
trustee Rodriguez,
Yes.
trustee Trailer,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Early,
Yes.
Mayor Austin.
Yes.
Motion passed.
All right, the next item on the list is the intergovernmental agreement for conduct of community development block grant program in Weld County. Was Don Sandoval able to?
Did anybody try to attend by Zoom?
He was on.
He was.
Oh,
Are there any? This is Don.
Hi,
there he is.
Don.
Back.
Okay, Mr. Sandoval, could you please give us an overview of this IGA?
Yes. Basically, what the IGA says is that it is allows the town of Milliken to be a participating jurisdiction for the Weld County CDBG program and would allow the town to apply for CDBG funds from the county next year. As you, from what's happening here is that the county has been designated by HUD as an urban county and is eligible to submit a consolidated plan and action plan to HUD for approval this year for funding for the next 3 years and beyond. We anticipate in the first year, well, we were told by HUD in the first year that we would get $960,200 for grant purposes. And HUD is requiring all participating jurisdictions or all municipalities that are outside the city of Greeley to sign intergovernmental agreements to be participating jurisdictions. What this means is that the town will not be allowed to apply to the state for CDBG funds, because now you would be part of the entitlement program for Weld County. The state would then lose a little bit of money. They get about $5 million statewide for their program for all non-entitlement local governments. And they have an application cycle once a year. I basically plan to develop the county grant program based on what I put together for the state program, because I actually helped put that program together many years ago for the CDBG program for the Department of Local Affairs. So I'm going to use basically the same process. I haven't set that up yet because we haven't gotten a approval from HUD that the consolidated plan and action plan are approved. They will be submitted later on this summer, late summer, to HUD, and then HUD will go through their approval process and hopefully have it approved by the end of the year. Let's see, the other thing that the contract basically talks about is it talks about that the town will participate in a needs assessment and I've sent a survey about what needs are in the town of Milliken. The reason we need to do that is we need to put those things in the action plan to develop a strategy so that the action plan can take a look at the broad needs of all the local governments that are participating in this program. The beauty of the program, and I'll just do this last thing, the beauty of the program by being entitlement is that we'll be able to develop a strategy over the long haul to be able to help low and moderate income persons. 70% of the dollars that we get have to go to assist low and moderate income persons. We intend to, or at least my intention, is to have a housing preservation program that is partly funded by this program, and that is to help low-income homeowners, seniors, and so on, to be able to stay in their homes by applying to us for the rehabilitation of their houses, to put major infrastructure in, such as a roof, handicapped accessibility issues, heating, those major elements that to help them stay in their homes. So that's basically what a little bit of the IGA and a little bit of the program future could be with this signing of the IGA or approving of the IGA. Any questions?
Well, just for clarification, I know I had some questions and I wanted to share that with the board. That I got answers from Mr. Sandoval on. And basically what it comes down to is if we don't participate in the IGA, and we have citizens that are low income that want to participate in this program, they will not be able to because we don't have the IGA. It does not conflict with our housing authority. We have the Milliken Housing Authority that does projects. So they're an arm of the town. It would be working in conjunction. And I had some questions about if the funds go over a year, but it looks like that we would be in agreement ahead of time, so there's no concerns there. I don't know if anybody has any other questions, but basically I felt very comfortable with what was presented to us from CMS on this program.
Go ahead.
Okay,
That's
so
right.
we'll go with Trustee Wiggman first.
Hi, Don. Good to hear your voice again. How are participants selected?
participants are selected by signing the IGA. So what we did is every municipality outside the city of Greeley has been asked to submit to sign this intergovernmental agreement, and therefore they would be a participating jurisdiction. Then they could apply for funds as we develop the grant program. So all the municipalities can do that. Greeley is its own entitlement city, so they receive their CDBG funds, and they have been receiving that for many years, almost 20 years. Yeah, anybody that signs the agreement, any municipality can apply for themselves or on behalf of a nonprofit that serves low and moderate income persons.
But how are the funds distributed? Maybe I didn't ask my question right on, say like.
Oh, okay. We haven't set up the grant program yet, but from HUD, every year HUD will, based on population, as county grows, will get more money. And so they have set aside dollars to give to the county commissioners for distribution. So we are set to set up the grant program. We haven't set that up completely yet, or actually at all, but I have talked to a couple of the commissioners about setting up an advisory committee that will receive the applications, then give their advice on the projects to the commissioners, and the commissioners will award the funds. They have the final say. They are the fiduciary responsibility. And we have to keep in mind that the funds, 70% of the funds have to be benefit low and moderate income persons. However, the way the program could run is that if you had a project, let's just say you had a project on one of your neighborhoods that meets 51% of the low mod benefit, then you would be eligible to apply for funds. It would be my job to make sure that the overall program meets the 70% guidelines. So that's why we have the housing rehabilitation program, which that's each person is a 100% low mod benefit. So seniors, low income families that meet 80% of the AMI or below, area median income or below, automatically qualify as 100%. So that's the balance that I, as a CDBG manager, will have to work on to make when we make recommendations to the commissioners.
So it wouldn't be Milliken gets $10,000, Fort Lupton gets $10,000.
No,
that's not the distribution.
No, there's no distribution. It's a competitive application process.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, Trustee Grandis.
So one of my questions was, you had mentioned something about when by accepting this IGA, we're pre-opting out of any state program. Is that what I heard?
CDBG programs, state CDBG. Right. Only that. You can still apply for energy impact or other, funding sources from the state, but the normal CDBG program, Community Development Block Grant Program from the state, you will not be eligible to apply for. The idea basically is that obviously you would be competing with about approximately 25 other municipalities, and rather than the rest of the state.
Yeah, because it says it's only the municipalities within Weld County that we're competing against now, as opposed to the whole state.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
And those, but we're sourcing this federal money versus state. So instead of the federal sending the money to the state and the state sending it to us, we're getting it directly.
Right. You're getting it. We're getting it direct from HUD, just like the state gets their portion direct from HUD, from the federal government.
Okay. Trustee Trailer, any questions?
I do. So how many grants do they award per year? They haven't written the program? Oh, okay.
I didn't understand the question. I'm sorry.
I was curious how many grants you would approve per year, but I guess this has to be approved first.
Yeah, we have not. Yeah, we haven't started the program. The timing basically is that I'm trying to develop a needs assessment from all the participating jurisdiction, and then putting that together with the consolidated plan and a strategy for an action plan to be approved by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And once they approve it, then they will send us $960,200 for the first program year and beyond. And just give you kind of just some information about this program has been going on since 1974 in various communities that have met the threshold.
Mayor Pro Tem Ehrlich, any questions?
I don't have any questions.
Thank you. Trustee Rodriguez, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions.
Trustee Smith,
I have no questions.
any final questions? Yeah, we got one more board question coming.
Has any municipality turned down the IGA?
No, not so far. I mean, we've had, let me see, the only ones we haven't heard that are having meetings late are you, Nunn, and Windsor are all having meetings that they haven't discussed this item, well, except Windsor has, and I had a work session with them, but every other municipality has approved the IGA.
Thank you.
Okay, Trevor McClanahan, Community Development Director, has some questions.
Thank you, Mayor Austin, for granting me the floor. Dawn, just out of a question, how is the state determining how much money the counties get? Does every county with a population over 200,000 receive the same amount of money to distribute to the municipalities?
No, and the state doesn't distribute it. It's the federal government distributes the money to the county. So the county has received a letter from HUD indicating that they are now met the population threshold of 200,000 and therefore are eligible to apply for the funds. They are asking us to submit a consolidated plan and action plan. So it is based on a couple of things. It's similar. I've talked to El Paso County, and they are getting just over $1 million. Their population is bigger, so Adams County has pooled their money. So what they've done is Thornton and Thornton and one other city in Adams County is entitlement, which they are over 50%, actually Westminster. So over 50,000 population. So they had their own CDBG funds, and I'm getting into too much detail, but Adams County and those municipalities signed an agreement so that they could pool their money to have it under one jurisdiction, one administrative jurisdiction.
Thanks. Dawn, do you have a feel for how much HUD gives the state for the
Yes.
competitive process outside of the entitlement communities?
Yes, the state generally gets about $5 million. And as entitlement community, as other communities grow to be entitlements like Well County just has, that means that their dollars will likely not increase and possibly could decrease because now they don't have to take care of a county and 32 municipalities. Well,
Thank
actually,
you.
yeah.
Thank you.
One final question from trustee Grunquist.
Yes, so I think you kind of touched on it, but the question was if, what amount does the state get for distribution along the same guidelines? If, you know, if a city community doesn't accept the federal funds, does the state instead get those funds for distribution? And can you retrieve the same approximate amount through the state?
Wow. I
Confusing.
think that you're asking is how much the state gets from HUD. Is that what you're asking for?
You had rattled off 5 million was the state allocation that they get versus say
that's
about
the
$1 million.
allocation that they get.
Okay.
Versus what?
Versus like Weld County's
You said
just under $1 million.
Yes.
And so if a community does not accept this, they then have to go to the state
And deal with 100 towns to get a grant rather than 30. Because you're applying through everybody in the state can apply through the state funds.
Mm-hmm.
You have to live in, be a city in Wall County to apply for the county funds.
Good.
It's tougher to get state funds.
No more questions for you at this time. Thank you.
You're welcome.
At this point, I
Thank you,
will.
Don.
Thank you very much. I'll accept the motion.
I move to approve the IGA.
Second.
Madam Clerk, please call for a vote.
I think I heard.
Holly.
Trustee Wakeman,
Yes.
trustee Smith,
Yes.
trustee Greenquist,
No.
trustee Rodriguez,
Yes.
trustee Trailer,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Ehrlich,
Yes.
Mayor Austin.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you. Okay. Now we have ordinance number 784, establishing municipal court as a qualified municipal court of record. This would be Matthew Gould, Town Attorney.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. At the work session, you probably recall last time, May 13th, there was a presentation given on the subject of transitioning the Milliken Municipal Court to operation as a qualified municipal court of record. What you have in front of you is the proposed ordinance to achieve that. This has been discussed for several months. The ordinance, excuse me, the included memo is the one that was circulated at the last work session. It describes several of the relevant considerations. I'm happy to answer any questions. I think that the packet materials are pretty complete. And then I believe that Cheryl circulated a revised red line. And that shows the changes that would be made to the Milliken Municipal Code as a result of this ordinance. There was a little bit of updating that was involved as well.
Thank you. All right, starting out with questions. Mayor Pro Tem Ehrlich,
I have none.
trustee Trailer,
I was curious what the technology that's being acquired. What's the new
I
technology?
believe we may actually have everything, and we just need to save the data. We have the recording devices, but we're looking at an expense of probably less than, did we say $5,000?
trustee Grunquist,
I had one question on page, what is this? 7. It had jury listed is provided for the courts of record. So it says upon demand of the defendant for trial by a jury, the jury shall be selected from. Just trying to follow that statement.
So that language, actually, that is one update that comes straight from the statute.
Okay.
And so I'm kind of shooting from the hip here, but my understanding is that that would probably come from the county. But the courts, that is an update that we really need to do, no matter what, because it really doesn't have anything to do with this being a qualified court of record.
Okay.
The standard in our code didn't quite match the statute. And so that's why that update is in there.
Second question was section 2-4-140, detention and incarceration charge. The language on A says that each person who pleads guilty or no contest to a violation of the town's ordinances or this code, and then it proceeds further. Should that be further clarified to be a violation that results in a detention or incarceration as opposed to just a violation in general?
So the substantive text, it has not really changed. What we did with that section is that we expanded the list of surcharges to go all the way up to the maximum possible penalty. Just continued the existing means of determining that surcharge. Now, help me understand your question, because I don't think that directly answers what
Okay, so the question is specifically the statement or no cost to a violation of the town's ordinances. So it broadly states to a violation under detention, it's under the section detention incarceration, but it doesn't specifically state that the violation results in a detention. So if I violate, but I'm not detained or incarcerated, does the surcharge still apply?
I think that it actually doesn't have anything to do with whether you're incarcerated. The use of the surcharge is specified in the municipal code for an incarceration, I believe it's a fund, hang on. The proceeds of the surcharge shall be paid into the general fund of the town to be used to defray the cost of incarcerating municipal offenders. So I think that's the point that's being made. It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with whether you're incarcerated. You still pay the surcharge.
Yeah, and I understand that's existing, but that's still my concern that you have a person who violates something that's paying for the incarceration fees of somebody else who's being incarcerated.
It is something that we could change if the board wanted to change it.
I
think that it's intended to ensure that enough money is available, and the surcharge is just honestly imposed on every guilty plea.
Yeah, and I read that seems to have been the historical up to this point, but it seems like if we're going to modify it, I think we should clarify that and either change the charges, but not punish everyone for those that are incarcerated. But if we're going to charge a surcharge for incarceration, it should be to those who are incarcerated or detained.
What I would want to do if we want to make that change is confirm that we can set a surcharge differently for different defendants. I'm not certain that that's possible. So if we wanted to do that, then I would recommend a motion tabling this so that we can investigate that question. I'm real cautious about that, about applying the surcharges not equally to all those that plead guilty.
Okay. I guess my concern towards the board is that if we're going to charge, if it's truly a surcharge just in general for funding, that's one thing. But if this is a detention incarceration surcharge, then if a person comes here with a violation of some other sort that has nothing to do with the detention incarceration, why are they paying an extra fee for the guy who's having to be detained? I don't see that as a fair thing. So I think we should table it and see what other recourse we can have.
I think that's a good point.
For me, I mean, you're detained when you're arrested, are you not? Correct?
That is correct.
Is that correct? Okay, so to me, that would be a legitimate fee if you're detained. You're not, I mean, if the language on the ticket or bill or whatever per se it is says detention and incarceration surcharge, it would cover both aspects. Is that the language that would be on?
So let's just say, let's just say you get a speeding ticket. You're pulled over, you're issued a citation, you're not detained. You would still pay a surcharge if you plead guilty to that speeding ticket. And I think the point that's being made is that the surcharge should only be applied if you're actually incarcerated. But I think incarceration might be a fairly small percentage of the tickets.
Isn't our surcharge right now $30?
It varies with the amount of the penalty that's imposed. And what this table does is it just extends that. That is really the only thing that's happened here. The new maximum penalty amount as a court of record is, I think, $2,650, and it just extends that same approach.
I guess I would be interested to hear what our police officer has, or chief has to say to that regard. I don't know how many people we incarcerate, and I understand the comment on, you know, do we have sufficient funds if we don't charge a surcharge? But really, I don't think penalizing those who get a speeding ticket in any manner as an incarceration fee is the correct way to respond to that cost.
And just one more comment. I believe that communities vary in how they use the surcharge.
Okay.
I did a little research on that briefly, and I found that, I don't remember the town, but another town that imposed a 20% surcharge and rounded up. Ours is about 10%, and it's stair-stepped.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So we currently charge a incarceration fee. If somebody goes to jail, they're on our charge, I think it's $56. $56 to $60.
A day.
For their incarceration.
And usually if it's incarceration, usually if we arrest somebody, it's gonna be on county charge.
Mm-hmm.
However, we're gonna be going to record, then, yeah, we're still gonna be charged that same.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah, thank you.
So just one other quick comment that may be relevant to the discussion on this subject. There has been a huge push in recent years, especially targeting Colorado, by those concerned about court fees causing people to be jailed, and when they can't afford those fees. And you know that may factor into this decision. You apply the surcharge across the board to generate whatever money you need for incarceration. But I certainly can investigate that if that's the direction we want to go.
Okay, Trustee Rodriguez, comments, questions? No. Trustee Smith,
I have none.
Trustee Wakeman,
No more comment.
I have a question. So the way you would separate it would be a guilty plea charge and an incarceration charge? I'm just confused, or because there's already a court charge. I guess that's where I'm confused.
Is that a question for me?
Yeah.
So my understanding is that what we want to evaluate is whether we can assess the surcharge solely on those that would be incarcerated, whether we can distinguish. And that's what I want to try to find the answer to.
So if we issue a citation, there is a surcharge. We can go to the mob traffic. There is a surcharge. However, there is a court cost that judge or the court will have.
So the surcharge that you're talking about on a traffic stop, what is that surcharge covering, or what's the nomenclature of that surcharge?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Where those funds go to. I think they go to currently, I think those surcharges go to equipment for the police department.
Yeah, there was
Yeah.
the board voted, I don't know, we did a resolution. We raised the surcharges from 15 to 30 with that money being earmarked for new police equipment, like and radios, headsets, and all that. I don't know if that's what it's being used for, but that's what it was supposed to be used for. And that was
Okay.
done about 3 or 4 years ago.
And my understanding is this surcharge is different. Is this a dedicated surcharge towards incarceration detainment fees?
Well, this is what was in the code, and I'm not familiar with another surcharge. It's possible that there was something passed that didn't make it in here or something. I can investigate,
So
but this is the only surcharge that I found in the code under the municipal court. I'll be honest, I think it's probably the same thing, and that's just a decision that was made on how to spend it, and the code just may have never been updated.
Maybe a further understanding of surcharges and how many we have and all that would be good.
It says in B that the proceeds from the surcharge will be paid into the general fund of the town.
Right.
And to be used to defray the cost of incarcerating municipal offenders. I mean, if we're getting charged $56 a day if somebody's in jail, this is peanuts compared to that.
All right, are there any further questions? I will take a motion on how to proceed.
If somebody wants a motion to approve the ordinance, the wording is similar to what we used for the fire code, and I can give that to you.
I would make that motion.
Okay, I'll read that motion. I move that proposed ordinance number 783, which would adopt the 2020 model traffic code for Colorado in the town of Milliken, be scheduled for a public hearing, and that notice of the hearing be published in accordance with statutory requirements with a description of the code taken from section 1 of the proposed ordinance. And bear in mind, this is being set for a hearing, just like, because it is a code that we're adopting by reference. So we can explore these issues and report back.
Quick correction, I think it's 784. You read 783.
That's because that's the one that he read it off of. Yes.
Okay.
No, if it,
I'm-
then we can correct the number, yes.
784.
784.
Second.
Thank you. Town clerk, please call for a vote.
Excuse me. Trustee Smith?
Yes.
Trustee Wakeman?
Yes.
Trustee Rodriguez?
Yes.
Trustee Grankus?
Yes.
Trustee Trailer?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Early?
Yes.
And Mayor Austin?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you. All right, now we're on resolution number 20-15, appointment of municipal judge. We interviewed 2 judges out of the ones that submitted resumes, and we've had some discussion, so I'm going to open it up for final discussion, and then we will move to appointing one of the judges. So starting at Trustee Granquist. Pros and cons of the judges, please.
I am trying to get back to my. If you'd like to skip me for a moment, I need to find my
That's fine.
notes.
I can start at the other end.
It wouldn't
Trustee
help.
Rodriguez.
Yes, Mayor. So for me, I think both candidates had excellent qualifications. They both speak Spanish, which I think is an asset to the community. They have years of experience in their field and both compassionate towards others. I felt Teresa had time constraints. And I felt Randy was a little more available for what we need, is my opinion.
Okay. Anything else you wanted to add?
I would say Randy has a background in family law, which to me is important, especially in our community. That's it.
Thank you. Trustee Smith.
I would agree with Nicole Rodriguez that Randy has a lot more time on his hands. And Teresa did seem to be very busy. And I think they're both very qualified, so I'm not sure how to vote. That's all I have.
Trustee Wakeman, do you have any commentary?
No.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Ehrlich.
I would agree with Scott and Nicole. Both candidates are qualified. That's all I got.
Trustee Trailer.
I did research on both of them. I was only at one interview though, but I did really like Randy. I think he right. Yeah, a lot of the background that I think we need and his time. So, but they're both excellent.
And Trustee Grunquist.
Yes.
Coming back to you.
So they both had very similar qualities. I think the two things that stood out for me on Randy was his current family law practice, as well as his elective history. Being elected for 21 years says a lot to me.
Are there any final comments? Hearing none, I'll take a motion.
I move to appoint Randy Engel as judge.
I'll second.
Town clerk, please call for a vote.
I'm sorry. Trustee Grunquist, you motion.
I second.
Sorry. Hard to think and talk at the same time. Especially when I'm getting a little tired. Trustee Wakeman.
Yes.
Trustee Smith.
Yes.
Trustee Grunquist.
Yes.
Trustee Rodriguez.
Yes.
Trustee Trailer.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Ehrlich.
No.
Mayor Austin.
Yes, were we supposed to read the resolution?
You don't,
No.
There was,
you don't need to read the resolution out
Okay.
loud. It's in the packet.
Okay.
What was your vote?
Okay. Yes. Sorry.
So Matt, motion passed with the appointment of Randy England, I believe is his name.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
All right.
Mayor Austin, I am sorry. I have garbled up action on the municipal court of record matter. I got confused between that and the model traffic code, which is coming up in a few minutes. There is no need to set the ordinance on the court of record for a hearing, and I apologize. We can table that, and I can report back, or it can be approved, and there should be a valid motion in the agenda item. So I think now's the time to make that clarification, and I apologize.
I think at this point, the idea was to table it to clarify the surcharge. Am I correct?
No, that's not the motion I made.
Yes. That was my understanding.
That was the
That's
agenda.
what you read?
The motion that I read
Right.
would have set it for a hearing, but that, I'm sorry, I was reading from a motion I prepared for the model traffic code. I apologize, I completely garbled it up. So I think what we need is a new motion, either to adopt the ordinance or to table it.
I move that the board table the ordinance number 784, an ordinance establishing a qualified municipal court of record for the town of Milliken, state of Colorado, pending some further investigation.
Second.
Town clerk, please call for the vote.
Trustee Wakeman,
Yes.
trustee Smith,
Sure, yes.
trustee Greenwood,
Yes.
trustee Rodriguez,
Yes.
trustee Trailer,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Early,
Oh, yes, I'd also like to see the costs that it's gonna cost us for the equipment be firmed up rather than an estimate.
Agreed.
And
I will I'll get that prepared for you.
and Mayor Austin.
yes,
Motion passed.
thank you. Okay, we're going on to resolution number 20-16, bank signatures. Wade Nickerson, Finance Director.
Good evening. This resolution is to update the signatures on file with TBK Bank to reflect changes in the board makeup as well as town staff. Staff recommends that the board would approve this. And I can take questions if you've got them.
Okay, starting with questions, trustee Wakeman,
I have no questions.
trustee Smith,
None.
trustee Rodriguez,
No questions.
Mayor Pro Tem Ehrlich,
None.
trustee Trailer,
No.
Trustee Grunquist.
Will you sign in cursive or print?
I will print.
Never mind. It's 8:30. You gotta lighten
Hearing
it
no
up.
questions, I'll take a motion.
I move to approve resolution 20-16 and authorize the mayor.
Second.
Town clerk, please call for a vote, starting with Mr. Grunquist.
Approve.
Does he have to nod or speak?
Aye, aye.
Trustee Smith,
Yes.
trustee Greenquist,
Yes.
trustee Wakeman,
Yes.
trustee Rodriguez,
Yes.
trustee Trailer,
Yes.
and Mayor Pro Tem Early,
Yes.
and Mayor Austin.
Yes,
Motion passed.
thank you. All righty, discussion agenda was proposed ordinance 783.
So this item is the one that I mentioned a few minutes ago, which is consideration of the 2020 model traffic code. There's been discussion of updating to the 2020 code between the police department and the town attorneys. That's been going on for probably a couple of months. The discussion did identify some areas where the model traffic code omits coverage, and we've added a few sections. Otherwise, the main goal of adopting the 2020 model traffic code is to maintain consistency with state standards. All we're doing tonight is we do need to set it for a hearing. And after any discussion, if you'd like me to read the proposed motion that I would recommend, then I'm happy to do that.
All right. See if anybody has any questions, concerns, or comments, starting with Mayor Pro Tem Ehrlich.
I'll save my questions and comments for the public hearing.
Okay, trustee Trailer,
Aye. Same.
trustee Grunquist,
None at this time.
trustee Wakeman,
Oh, none at this time.
trustee Smith,
I have none at this time.
trustee Rodriguez.
No questions at this time.
Okay, then I would entertain a motion for a public hearing.
Would you like me to read? Okay.
Yes.
I move that proposed ordinance number 783, which would adopt the 2020 model traffic code for Colorado in the town of Milliken, be scheduled for a public hearing, and that notice of the hearing be published in accordance with statutory requirements, with a description of the code taken from section 1 of the proposed ordinance.
So move.
Second it.
Town clerk, please call for a vote.
Trustee Trailer,
Yes.
trustee Rodriguez,
Yes.
trustee Greenquist,
Yes.
trustee Smith,
Yes.
trustee Wakeman,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Early,
Yes.
Mayor Austin.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Okay, the last item on the list is the written report from Western Equipment. I don't think we have any questions on that, do we? I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
done. Thank goodness that we approved that HVAC contract, because I'm telling you.
That don't mean it's gonna get fixed.
I wasn't sure
We've
whether.
been dealing
I
with
was
this for 5 years.
I wasn't sure it was hot or cold. Mr. Clint, will
I
they be
moved to
fixing the
adjourn.
heating and air in this building first?
Who seconded the motion?
I did.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, my gosh.
Sorry, Val.
Or did you?
One minute I need a sweater, the next minute I'm like sitting there going,